Hello, everybody. As a member of UU and a co-founder of Collier Freedom, it is an honor to welcome you all, our in-person guests, as well as our very large Zoom audience, too. This program was conceived by Jim Nathan of Floridians for Democracy there. Along with myself and David Milstein over here. We felt that this program would be of great value at this time in our nation's history. Jim Nathan from Floridians for Democracy will be introducing our speakers following opening comments from Rick Wilson representing the Lincoln Project on the big screen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phyllis, and thanks to everybody for being here today. And for those of you who are participating virtually, you're going to be included in this as well, especially during the Q&A, but we hope you enjoy today's program. Again, thank you, Phyllis, for making all the arrangements. She cooked the food early this morning and baked the cookies and was very busy with that. And it was really David Milstein who contacted me some months ago, and he said, we should do something in October around fascism. And, you know, in the early stages of Floridians for Democracy, I have to admit that I was reluctant to use the word fascism. But during this same period of time, as we've learned about Project 2025 and the autocratic movement that's going on, this is not a partisan issue. I mean, this is not a partisan issue. This is a future of our country issue. And so today we have this wonderful program, and I get the opportunity to introduce to you virtually, who will be joining us on the big screen above my head here, Rick Wilson. So Rick is a Florida native and a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He's a longtime Republican strategist, award-winning ad maker, and political commentator. In 2015, ancient history, Rick emerged as one of the earliest and most vocal critics, especially Republican vocal critics, of Donald Trump. He helped found the Never Trump movement, and his work has been widely published in a variety of media outlets. He's often called upon for his sharp-edged and witty political insight. We had somebody ask us early on, well, what's he going to say? And I said, you don't script Rick Wilson. He's provided strategic counsel to candidates, parties, corporate associations, government clients across the nation and around the world. He's produced televised political commercials for governors, U.S. Senate candidates, super PACs, and corporations. Following this 90-second powerful Lincoln Project ad that Floridians for Democracy has invested in to increase its visibility, Rick will share his perspectives of where we are 30 days out.
Driver's license, registration.
Here you go, sir. How's your day going?
That's your daughter?
Sure is.
Abigail, right?
How do you know her?
Were you about 8 weeks pregnant? So you've been spotting recently. You've had any cramps or nausea?
That's personal.
You been taking your prenatal vitamins?
Excuse me?
Are you ticketing me for something?
Where are you heading, Abigail?
To go see my older sister, Natalie.
Well, that's strange. This says here that Natalie's at a concert in Dallas. And your navigation is set to a women's health clinic in one of those abortion states.
We have the right to travel.
Not anymore. Step out of the car.
Please, officer.
Both of you out now. You, sir, are under arrest for crossing state lines to obtain an abortion for a minor under your care. And you, young lady, well, you're under arrest for evading motherhood.
Well, we try not to make our ads too subtle, so that the point of things like Project 2025 and Donald Trump's plans for this country aren't missed in the chaos of everything else that's going on around us. Folks, thank you for having me today. I'm very grateful for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you today about what we see the current terrain of the 2024 election looking like, and the reasons we're fighting so hard for a big victory this fall for Vice President Harris. As said, it has made the intensity of our fight even more powerful and passionate. So I want to walk you through a little bit about where we come from. The Lincoln Project was formed by a group of ex-Republicans. All of us had come through presidential and governors and Senate campaigns. And we recognized back in 2019 that there was no real functionality inside the Democratic Party to produce and deploy advertising and communications in the way that we did for our old friends on the Republican side. And by the way, I apologize for any noise today. When we started the Lincoln Project, our research showed us that between 3 and 8% of Republican voters could be persuaded away from Trump. 9%, pretty much where the math led us to believe we would land. It was enormously important for the campaigns in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, etc. We helped provide a key margin of victory in those states. In 2022, we went around the country and targeted a bunch of very, very dangerous MAGA candidates who were running for governor, secretary of state, U.S. Senate, and other races. We had a very successful year, winning 17 out of the 21 races we targeted, which in politics is a World Series season. But this year we face something that's much darker and much more threatening. And it is a weaponized political party that has abandoned the predicates and the premises and the philosophical underpinning that it claimed to embrace for years. Today's Republican Party is not about limited government. It is not about the rule of law. It is not about the Constitution. It is not about American interests and alliances around the world. It is not about free economic opportunity for Americans. It is, in fact, now a definitionally fascist party. They believe in the unlimited power of the executive. Thanks to the Supreme Court, they got it. They believe in statism, where the government will decide how the economy is going to operate. They believe in violence as a tool of politics. They believe in the deployment and the usage of a propaganda machine to enforce the will of the party and the leader. It does not resemble America at all. It has now reached the point where the depth of the corruption of what was the Republican Party has led to a coalition for Kamala Harris that ranges on one end at Bernie Sanders and the other end of people like Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, Rick Wilson, Stuart Stevens, Adam Kinzinger. Those of us in this coalition understand it is the proverbial Big Ten. And I want to speak to you a little bit about why we need to keep up the intensity in this last 30 days now, I guess. It's because complacency and laziness and exhaustion are enemies of freedom. Right now, we have to run through the tape. We have to finish this race, not just strong, we have to finish this race at a level of intensity to do two big things. One, we must elect Kamala Harris as president. The fate of this country literally hangs in the political balance. We will decide on November 5th whether this country is going to continue as a republic based on democratic principles, or if it is going to descend into overt fascism. And you know, as somebody who hesitates to use the word powerful thing, people don't want to admit this is possible in America. They don't want to admit that the things they're seeing with their own eyes are a future of this country that will be so dark and so unbelievably perilous that they don't want to look it straight in the eye. They don't want to believe it's possible. They don't want to think that this could happen here. I'm here to tell you it can happen here. A lot of us have done work in people. They are not. Saddam Hussein, on paper, to the United Nations, was for a long time still considered a semi-democracy because he had elections every couple of years. Now, he won those elections with 102% of the vote, and there was never any competition. But the idea that we can slip into authoritarianism and slip into fascism without knowing it's coming, I don't want Americans to have an excuse for that. And there's only one simple thing we can do, and that is to get out a vote that is so massive on Election Day this year. And this is something that Lincoln Project is now dedicating itself to, of winning these giant swing states so that Donald Trump emerges from this, his political reputation as a powerful figure them at the ballot box. If you in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and a country that is starting to break away from Trumpism. And it's why Florida is so close. It's why Texas is so close. And when I say Texas and Florida are close, it's within 3 or 4 points now. Donald Trump should be leading both of those states on paper by double digits, by 10 to 12 points. He is not. There is a sense in the country that the risk and the danger of Trump has reached its pinnacle. It has. Election Day will be the most dangerous day of our lives. It will be the most dangerous moment we face as a country. But I'm here to tell you your diligence of making sure you're checking your voter registration now, of voting early or absentee. And you do that, by the way, so the Harris campaign doesn't have to chase you. Once you've voted early or absentee, they know you voted. And they don't have to go after you to try to persuade you. They can move those resources to other people. That idea is, hold on. I'm sorry, I'm been told we're having some difficulties here.
Yeah, so Rick,
I'm going to stop my video and hope. I apologize, folks. I'm on hotel Wi-Fi. So, hang on. Again, traffic in the background. I apologize. But the idea that we win on Election Day is vital. And you've got to get out. Make sure your registration hasn't been canceled. The 7th is the last day to register to vote in Florida. You need to register if you have not yet. But the real trick of fascism, as we've seen in Florida and beyond, is in the counting phase. This country is going to be in an enormous danger between Election Day and the moment Kamala Harris's hand comes off that Bible. You will see allies of Donald Trump trying to overturn this election in Georgia. You will see them trying to overturn this election in a lot of states. You will see Ron DeSantis, if it's close in Florida, you will see his election police come out in force. We need to make sure that the number is so big and so overwhelming on Election Day that it takes the wind out of the sails of the implementers and enablers of this fascist moment that Trump wants to encounter. Look, we have a lot at stake now. There is a tremendous amount of clear and overwhelming evidence of what they want to do. And what they want to do is to establish a framework where things like Project 2025 and Agenda 47 can be implemented. That framework, we've seen the paper on it already. We've seen the idea of Trump pretending to deny it and yet embracing all of its principles. And as we all know, no one on this call needs to be told that if he does win, Project 2025 goes right back to the head of the line, and he'll laugh and say, "Yes, I lied to you because I was going to do this all along." We know how this guy operates. We know what the stakes are. So the degree to which we are able to roll up that number on election day is the way that we're going to prevent them from playing their games for 2 months between election day and inauguration day. And it's the only thing that it's going to stop the implementation of the things that they've outlined in Project 2025, which again is a post-conservative document. It is not conservative. It is incredibly radical. The radical nature of that document is very clear when it comes to individual rights, whether it's for women or LGBT folks or critics of the president, when it comes to the way the government will be deployed as a weapon against dissent, when it comes to the ways that Donald Trump will engage in the largest organization of a mass deportation and of the rounding up of human beings since Mao or Stalin. It is enormously clear what the stakes are, enormously clear what the risks now are, and those risks will not diminish given a close election. We need to push them as far as they possibly can into the direction of thinking that Trump and Trumpism is a losing electoral strategy, because we believe that it is, and to push the people in the wake of Trump, in the aftermath of Trump, into the dustbin of political history. In Florida, you've seen Ron DeSantis try to be Trump without the charm. And the things he's done in terms of his election police, the things he's done in terms of weaponizing the government to overtly engage in politics with his attempt to overturn Amendment or to defeat Amendment 4, all these things are a preview of what happens when you have smarter people than Trump trying to implement a fascist governing model. Ron DeSantis is the beta test of that model. It is an ugly and inhumane model, as you've seen, with your own eyes. But it nonetheless is something that Republicans are greatly encouraged about emulating around the country. So defeating Trump isn't the end of this argument or the end of this battle. It's the beginning of this battle. We have to beat him again during the chaos period between Election Day and January 6th on certification. We have to resist their overt calls to violence, which they will engage in violence in this election. And then we have to go out. The mission doesn't end now. The mission isn't over now. The mission is going to end up having to continue, because there are a lot of mini me's of Donald Trump out there. Ron DeSantis is just one of them. We have to go out and take those people out electorally. We have to go out and raise the political price from engaging in that kind of behavior. We have to go out and defeat these people again and again until the idea that this neo-authoritarianism, this fascist model that's emerged on the Republican side of the equation, is a political and social poison that destroys their party. And I believe this country needs a center-right party. I believe it needs two viable, exciting, engaged political movements. I don't think one-party states, left or right, ever work out well. I think, though, that for the sake of this democracy, it is vital. It is absolutely essential. It's existential that the current Republican Party be dismantled and the Trump movement be dismantled. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. This election is just the start of that. But With that, I can stick around for a few minutes to do questions if you guys want to do them in the chat or ask them. I can hear fine. I apologize for the video quality here. It started out okay and went downhill fast. So with that, let's do some Q&A if you want, or we can wrap it up. Either way is good.
We have a couple minutes available for a question or two for Rick before, and we're going to do a whole Q&A after our two speakers. But does anybody, while we still have Rick in California, we'll take two questions, one here and one over here. No.
Rick, how do you foresee things hitting the fan when Steve Bannon is out of prison at the end of this month?
Well, look, I mean, you should look at it how quickly Roger Stone and Paul Manafort have gone back into Trump's orbit. They're back there again, playing their games, doing what they do. Bannon is the implementer and a planner of a lot of this. He is an overt fascist. He's an overt Leninist by his own admission. Nothing about Steve Bannon should ever let you sleep well at night. He's a determined player in the global movement to eliminate democracy and to impose nationalism, hyperpopulism, and fascism in the world. He will be in prison for another 26 days. When he gets out, he's going to be in court for his build the wall fraud trial. At that point, we're going to see, I think, a major distraction for brother Steve, but he is a danger. He will be back in Trump's orbit immediately. Trump likes people like Steve Bannon when they are engaging in evil, and Steve Bannon is exceptional at engaging in evil. Steve Bannon is one of the proximate causes of January 6th. He was in the room at the Willard Hotel as part of the conspiracy, the Stop Steal conspiracy. I think we need to keep a very close eye on Steve, and I hope that the conditions of his release include monitoring and not allowing him to associate with felons, which Donald Trump is one.
Thank you. Rick, do you think that J.D. Vance has now maybe overtaken Ron DeSantis's, position moving forward? And also, what did you think of
100%,
Tina?
100%. Look, Ron DeSantis was the great, very white hope for a lot of Republicans. They thought that he was smart and technocratic and all this other business. But Ron DeSantis is a black hole where charisma goes to die. The advantage we have with Ron DeSantis is that he does not like humans and they don't like him. It's like, those alien movies where the dog, barks at the alien in the human suit. This guy just makes people's skin crawl when they talk to him. He's not a good guy politically, but he's also a bad candidate. So J.D. Vance is a lot slicker and smoother. J.D. Vance is a lot more presentable, and the future right now that Donald Trump should fear is if he wins, J.D. Vance will shiv him almost immediately to try to take power over with the 25th Amendment hit. That will not be a good outcome for America because J.D. Vance is frankly more intelligent and dangerous than Trump in that regard.
We got time for one more question. We're going to take one from the virtual, and then we'll get on with our other speakers. But thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks.
Yeah, Rick, how will we overcome the gerrymandering that's going on? We may win a landslide popular vote, but we may not win the electoral vote.
Well, no, electoral votes don't have anything to do with gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is about legislative races in the congressional and the state legislative races. The gerrymandering is extraordinary. It is broad. It is extreme. In Florida, we passed Amendments 5 and 6 back in 2010 that were supposed to reform it. The Republicans found a set of loopholes in those amendments. I frankly think that in 2026, we need to do a statewide ballot initiative in Florida that explicitly forbids and criminalizes partisan gerrymandering in the state at the congressional and at the state level. I think it needs to have many more teeth to it because right now the Republicans, as I said, they hacked the system essentially of the two ballot initiatives that supposedly ensured nonpartisan redistricting. It needs to be taken out of the hands of elected officials needs to be completely withdrawn from the idea that the maps that are drawn at the Republican Party of Florida are taken to the governor's office and rubber stamped. The Electoral College is what it is on the national level, where it is wired into the Constitution. I'm a realist about it. It's not going away. We're not getting rid of it. We have to learn to play the game with the Electoral College rather than complain about it. People don't like that answer. They want a popular vote. That's not how the Constitution is wired up. We will never, ever get a national ability to change the Electoral College in our lifetimes, because getting a constitutional amendment, no matter how good you think it is, requires 2/3 of the state legislatures to approve it. It's never happening. I'd much rather focus our time, our energy, our effort, our intensity, and our money on converting these states and winning these states. So that's my take on that. Popular vote is all fine and good, but unless you win the Electoral College, you're not in the game.
Rick, we're going to try to sandwich one more quick question in, and then we'll thank you.
The question is, since I'm not watching Fox News, are the Lincoln Project are the Lincoln Project ads running on Fox News?
Sometimes, but they don't. But don't mistake my goal and our goal of the Lincoln Project. I am not trying to convert the guy in the pickup truck with the Punisher sticker and the Trump flag and the QAnon tags on his license plate. That's not my target. We are working to persuade moderate and independent leaning Republican voters. We are working to persuade more affluent, more suburban, more educated Republican voters, and we're extraordinarily good at what we do. Those voters represent between 7 and 15% of the Republican Party now. It used to be only between 3 and 8%. Now it's between 7 and 15%. Those are the people I'm persuading. I am not trying to change the mind of the dedicated Sean Hannity viewer. I don't have the resources to do that. And I don't need it. I don't need the resources to do that. I need to pick the lock, not break the lock. If I take away those soft Republican voters, those Liz Cheney Republicans, those Nikki Haley Republicans, if those people leave, the Republican Party dies. If they don't vote for Trump, he cannot win. So I am never going to be the guy who persuades those people. They are so deeply locked in a cognitive box that Donald Trump and Fox and Rupert Murdoch have created for them. It is impossible to break them out in any real sense of the word. But there are a lot of Republicans who aren't Fox viewers, who are more educated, who understand the risks of Trump, who look at Trump and they can't answer the fundamental question. And we asked our voters this question a lot. Is this what you are? Do you want your son to treat women like Trump does? Do you want your daughter to be in an environment where men like Trump have power over her? Do you want to say to your kids, I voted for this guy because I was afraid of imaginary communism, when it means that your daughter loses her rights as an American? So it's a good question. It's a valid question, but it's definitely not our mission. The conversion of those people has to happen with the deaths of Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump, when God finally cuts the cord on both those guys because of age and diet. The world will start to change a little bit, but the power Fox has had to transform the minds of Republican voters in this country to go from Ronald Reagan to fascism in 30 years is shocking, but it's not something that my group can convert in the short term. I would try it if I had the resources, but that's $1 billion questions, not a millions of dollars question.
Rick, thank you so much. We are truly honored.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation today, everybody. And I wish our technical stuff had worked a little better, but I am very grateful for the chance to speak to you all. I want to encourage you one more time. Please, 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 today, go on vote.org and check your registration, because Ron DeSantis has been playing a lot of games, and Republican county ballot election supervisors have been playing a lot of games. Make sure you haven't been purged off the rolls. If you have, October 7th, Monday, is the last day to register in Florida. I want to also encourage you, if you can do it, go get either an absentee or a mail-in ballot, or vote early. As soon as those votes are in the bank, that's good for the Harris campaign. It lets them dedicate resources elsewhere. Keep up the fight. Never stop. Look, I've been doing this for 9 years now, since 2015. I'm very tired. I want to go spray my granddaughter. I want to write more books, but I can't stop this fight. I can't do those things that I want to do in my life until we win. It is essential and urgent, and I would encourage all of you to stay in this battle until the last. Thank you very much for having me.
Great.
I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Rick. And we know all of you that are watching this virtually are clapping in your own homes or wherever you might be at this moment. At the table for Floridians for Democracy, we have some handouts also that tell you things you can give to other people, basically Rick's message. When we were driving here today, we couldn't get in the car until I finished my mail-in ballot. Karen would not let us leave to come down here without that. And Rick's right, get your votes in, I can't say early and often, but I can say it, but get your vote in because it really is very meaningful. And it takes you off the list of getting the contacts. But the important thing is organizations like the Lincoln Project, when they're doing their ads, they don't have to target you because you've already voted. So they're going to go after and spend that money and those ads on the people that haven't voted. So therefore, we're going to move now into introductions of our two speakers and then the process, so you don't have to put up with me anymore till the very end. I'm going to introduce both of our speakers, and then I will also introduce to you the facilitator for our Q&A period. So we're going to start off sequentially with Dr. Dale Anderson, retired internal medicine physician and healthcare executive now living in Sarasota. He's devoted much of his recent retirement time to actively research and present on topics related to fascism, authoritarianism, and the future of American democracy, not what he went to medical school for. As many of us are aware, Sarasota has become ground zero for much of the MAGA movement. Today you will learn more about how Sarasota is already a laboratory for the draconian authoritarian Project 2025. He should feel at home here in this Unitarian congregation, as Dale is the past president of the UU Congregation of Sarasota, chairs the National UU Social Justice Advocacy Committee, and is active in his community, including serving as president of the Sarasota Concert Association, a member of the Minnesota Anti-Racism Coalition, and a current candidate for the board of Sarasota Memorial Health System. You'll enjoy Dr. Dale Anderson. And David Silverberg didn't have to drive as far. He's a writer and editor with extensive experience covering political, military, and security topics. He conceived and launched numerous specialized media outlets, both print and digital, during a 32-year career based in Washington, D.C. He was the managing editor of The Hill, founding editor of the Homeland Security magazine, HS Today, author of the book Congress for Dummies. I guess another way of saying it is Congressional Dummies. And served as assistant editor of Near East Report, the newsletter of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. David was the 2009, the very first recipient of the Journalism That Matters Award from the American Society of Business Publication Editors. He's well known here in Naples for the Paradise Progressive blog covering Southwest Florida politics that he started because he felt they were insufficiently covered by local media. He's well qualified to share his perspectives of the MAGA activities going on in Collier County. Following their two presentations, we will open up for Q&A both from the virtual and the local participating in-person audience. We will have a phenomenal facilitator for that discussion, Mike Canary. Mike is the producer of Gulf Coast Live, co-creator and host of the WGCU podcast, 3 Song Stories, Biography Through Music. He's worked as the host of All Things Considered, the host of Morning Edition. He also served as a PR director for the Alliance for the Arts and was principal communicator at the election integrity company Free and Fair. He has a passion and understanding for our discussions to protect and preserve democracy, and recently moderated a highly attended program on the importance of civility held right here in Naples. That's the end of me, and now here comes Dr. Dale Anderson. Somehow your slides got moved.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Speaker's working? So we need to get my PowerPoint up going here. See if we can get that. All right, so I entitled this Fascism Comes to Sarasota. And not quite the jack boots in the picture, but what I'm going to talk to you this afternoon is the cumulative effect over the last 4 to 6 years of the impact of the policies that we've seen coming out of Tallahassee on really one of the great cities of Florida, Sarasota. And I'm going to start by talking about a response that I asked one of my favorite consultants, ChatGPT. So I asked him this very loaded question. I said, is it an abuse of power for a state government to use its authority to punish ideological opponents and critics? And I thought, that's a pretty easy question. And he came back and said, in democratic societies, governments are expected to respect freedom of speech, the right to dissent, and political diversity. That's so fundamental, and there's been so much of this pressure and repercussions on people that speak out here that we get used to that and think that it's normal. It's absolutely not normal. Targeting individuals or groups based on their political beliefs or criticisms of the government undermines these core democratic values. And finally, such actions can lead to authoritarianism, as the government may manipulate its power to entrench its own views while marginalizing others. Good response. So how'd we get here? I go back to one of my favorite little books. It's a very small book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. I think that was published maybe 4 years ago. And his number 3 of those 20 says, beware of one-party states. And one of the reasons we are where we are is that we've been living in a one-party state for about 20 years. And it's even worse when it's a trifecta state. And a trifecta is where the House and the Senate and the governorship are all managed by one party. You can see from the map here that there are 17 trifecta Democratic states, 23 trifecta Republican states, and then ones with mixed party are in the gray. And all of these states that are shown in black are opportunities for trouble. Where do we really get down deep and understand this further is to go to David Pepper's first book. And David Pepper is a lawyer that was very active in the Ohio Democratic Party structure. He published this book a few years ago, and he said, in recent decades, state legislatures have atrophied as broadly representative bodies have become easily captive to narrow interests. Along the way, they have discovered that their extreme and unpopular agendas face no accountability. The ultimate danger is that these state houses calcify into permanent anti-democratic structures, forever immune from popular will, constantly damaging the common goods while ripping apart American democracy. This is a book that goes into great detail on how the Republican Party has captured state legislatures and the consequence of it. Highly recommended. So this is a picture that I use sometimes to think about democracy, because the three fundamental pillars, if you read about democracy, are free and fair elections, in which all citizens have an opportunity to vote, all adults. Freedoms such as freedom of the press, assembly, association, the liberal values of our constitutional liberal democracy, and then a constitutional rule of law. And on the left then, these are structures that Larry Diamond, who published a book called Ill Winds in 2017, these are the structures around those three pillars that are really important for protecting and securing democracy. One is these government oversight institutions that can check the potential high level of corruption, these ethics organizations that are scattered throughout the federal government. A second is an independent judiciary to uphold the rule of law, and a trustworthy law enforcement to administer the law. Finally, down at the bottom, separation of church and state and democratic norms. All of these things are aspects of a liberal democratic, or a liberal democracy, as a constitutional democracy. And I have this little wrecking ball shown on each of those because if you think back to what's been happening at the federal level, there's been this assault on our free and fair elections. There have been an assault on our freedoms. Our constitutional rule of law took a huge wrecking ball with the Supreme Court decision about presidential immunity. And if you look on Project 2025, everything on the left side of this gets destroyed. You know, independent judiciary, independent trustworthy law enforcement, government oversight, all of these are going to be targets where instead of loyalty to the Constitution, it'll be loyalty to the president. But what we're talking about today is on the right side of this, which is another aspect of the protection of democracies, which is a lively and vibrant civil society. And that includes schools, universities, civic organizations, professional groups, religious organizations like this one, news media, journalism, etc. That's the group that, if you look at those, federal government or the federal politics aren't going to have as much impact on that as state politics. And here's where I think the state of Florida has been targeting these groups to make them less effective in terms of protecting our Constitution, or protecting our democracy. So there's this term, and I don't speak German, Gleichschaltung. If you read about the history of the Nazis as they took over Germany in 1933, within that first year, there was this movement to take control of all aspects of society. So it was clubs and political parties and civic groups. And this term is pretty well recognized. It has to do with establishing a control and coordination of all aspects of the society. It's well described in this book called The Nazi Seizure of Power, which was actually written in 1965, where this professor, William Sheridan Allen, talks about what happened to one little town called Nordheim in Germany in 1933. But this movement occurred over about a year, and within a year, most of these civic organizations were controlled by the Nazi Party. And what I'm fearful for is that what's happening here in Florida is our institutions and many of our most important organizations in our communities are being taken control by the Florida version of this Gleichschaltung. So this is a picture of, this is actually not the county, but this is a picture of Sarasota proper. The red outlines, you know, Sarasota is a small portion of a big county. But these are the organizations that have been targeted or harmed in Sarasota. And we start, and I'm going to go through these because I think it's important to see how this works. So you have New College at the top, the first one, the Sarasota County Public Schools, Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and then you have these other organizations, Planned Parenthood, Embracing Our Differences, this low-power radio station, WSLR Fogartyville, and the Sarasota County Libraries. In addition, I've listed up on the top other organizations that have been harmed, but I'm not going to go through much of those. League of Women Voters, the Sarasota County Charter, of course, unions. And then there's this whole group of citizens that have been harmed, and that's listed in those categories on the right. So we'll start with New College. This was a liberal arts college, 689 enrollment, small, 94 faculty members. Number 5, best public liberal arts college on U.S. News and Report in 2022, I believe. And it was a very inclusive college. It was a place where LGBTQ people felt very comfortable at home. And it didn't have a sports program. So what happened? January 2023, out of the blue, Governor DeSantis appointed 6 right-wing radicals to the board of New College. They're shown there in the red. Out of the 13 members, Dr. Spalding is at Emory University, but then you have Christopher Rufo, the person that originated the attack on the critical race theory, CRT, works for the Manhattan Institute. Charles Kessling from the Claremont Institute, which is some people refer to as Trump's brain. You have Ron Cristaldi, he's a lawyer from Tampa. And then you have a Hillsdale professor, and you know Hillsdale College is that small Christian college that has been the plan is for taking the classic education of Hillsdale College, the Christian college there, and emulate it at New College, and then also for the public school system. And then finally, Dr. Ryan T. Anderson, who's written such books as When Harry Becomes Sally, which is an anti-trans book that is so egregious that Amazon wouldn't put it on their for sale, and others about marriage and so forth. And can you imagine for a very inclusive small college like New College to have somebody on the board that has written such an anti-trans book was just a shock to the system. But that's enough to take control. And what they did within the first stage of once they got in control, they fired the president, eliminated the diversity, equity, and inclusion department, terminated the gender studies program, and moved forward with this, quote, classic education, which I don't know how to spell education, but other than that, or recruiting. And they're into recruiting sports. Their incoming class has like 50, I think some numbers, the baseball, and they've never had a sports before. So they're trying to change the entire nature of the college. As a result of this, 40% of the faculty have left, and a good proportion of the students have transferred. When this was happening, the American Association of University Professors put out a report in December of 2023 that I think it's worth, if anybody really wants to know what's happening, is look this up and read their report. The summary was that the hostile takeover of New College is both a test and a blueprint. That this is one of those laboratory of autocracy things that says, how much could we change public colleges around the nation? And some of the same things that are happening here are being looked at in Texas. And the legislation, this legislation constituted a systemic effort to dictate and enforce conformity with a narrow and reactionary political agenda, and the chilling effect has already been felt by the faculty. Why New College? Is it just happenstance that when the Nazis took control in 1933 in Germany, that one of the first institutions they attacked was Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science. This is an institute that was created in 1919, and it was kind of a center of study of transgender and LGBT people. They had interviews and books. There were thousands of books that he had written on this subject, and it was the target. The students went in, they ransacked the place, took the books out, and several days later burned them. Luckily, Magnus Hirschfeld was out of the country at the time and survived this attack. So you look to the small LGBT-friendly college, New College, and what happens? They go in, they end the gender studies, and just a few months ago, some students noticed that there were books, all from the gender studies portion of the library. All these library books had been removed and thrown in the trash, an equivalent kind of action as book burning. So Umair Haque has been writing about the fascist nature of the Republican Party for a long time, when it first came out, trying to warn everybody. But one of his comments is that fascism is best seen as a kind of theft. The in-group proceeds to rob those less powerful than them of everything without guilt or shame. They steal their dignity, their belongings, their selfhood, their work, their social milieu, and their possessions. And that's really what's happened to the students and the faculty at New College. This group went in, took control, and stole not only the jobs of those people, but took away the whole milieu and the social structure for that group. So that New College has been captured. Sarasota school system, A+ rated school system, 56 schools, 14 charter schools among that 56, 45,000 students, 40 private schools in the community, not part of the school system. But what happens? The November 2022 election, Bridget Sigler and several others who were kind of part of the program get elected. Tom Edwards is the only non-MAGA person that is on the group, and they take control. Right away, they fire the superintendent. The chaos develops in all the board meetings. And now you've probably seen some of that in the news about the chaos that occurred at the school system board. One of the places you can go to read this is in a Salon article that goes through all the details. Luckily, in the primary election just recently, Liz Barker defeated Karen Rose, so there was a little bit of a catchback in terms of control. But essentially, Sarasota County Public Schools are captured by this group. So you have the school system, the college, and then more recently, they've attacked the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, the largest employer in the community. 3 members of the MAGA group, the anti-vaxxers, people that don't believe in the COVID-19 vaccinations or masks, were elected to the board and began challenging the whole health system around whether they had been very effective in terms of treating COVID during that period of time. They required an audit of their performance, which the hospital system provided and showed good outcomes, but they've persisted on this. More recently, they've attempted to take control of the entire board with these 4 candidates shown in the pink down here. This was an August election. All of them were defeated by the regular Republicans, and so there's been an opportunity for the hospital to protect itself going forward. So it's been attacked but not captured. We move on into the attack on the arts community. You're all aware that Governor DeSantis vetoed all the arts grants out of the bill, out of the budget in June of 2024. $32 million in arts and museum grants were canceled. 600 arts organizations and 33 theaters and museums lost their grant money, and Sarasota itself had $1.44 million they lost. And his reason was because there was some of the money was going to these fringe festivals. These are festivals that were started in 1947 in Edinburgh, Scotland. They're all around the country in major cities. There were 4 of them, and they had these small amounts of money that were associated with them. But DeSantis said our tax dollars shouldn't go to supporting these sexual events, and he canceled the whole piece. So this starts to feel like the creation of the right chamber of culture, something very similar, where Governor DeSantis and the party is thinking, how can we get control of all the money that supports arts so that we can focus it on those kind of patriotic and national things that we want. And to follow up on this, the Sarasota County Commission took some of the tax dollars that have been supporting Arts Alliance in Sarasota and targeted just 3 organizations to veto their money. And they were Embracing Our Differences, the Fogartyville Arts and Media Center, and the Chalk Festival. Well, the Embracing Our Differences by itself is just fundamentally about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you can see why it would be a target of this group. They did this despite the fact that this organization brings in 2024, 422,000 visitors to the community. But they took the money away from this group. They took the money away from WSL Fogartyville, a low-power radio station that promotes diversity, equity, inclusion in the community, and has some radio programs like Democracy Now! And Tom Hartman's Call, things that are not compatible with what the Republicans see. So they've harmed those, and the other groups that have been harmed are Planned Parenthood. There's been an assault on Planned Parenthood since 2016 when Governor Scott attempted to defund it. There has been an assault on the Sarasota County Public Library. What they did there was they said because their president of the library is Emily Drabinski, a self-proclaimed lesbian Marxist, that they're going to cut all ties with the American Library Association. And the fees were small, less than $4,000, but that cut all of the professional libraries, or all the librarians in Sarasota out of the opportunity to participate in educational programs, get accreditation and those kind of things. Another, similar to kind of his response to the Disney, which was, if you criticize us, we're going to harm you. So you look across this whole issue, you see New College, Memorial Hospital, Sarasota Public Schools, two small organizations that promoted diversity and equity, the Planned Parenthood and the library system. And that harm has gone across all of those organizations that are important to the county. So we see this movement creating harm across the whole population. Suppression of individual freedoms, persecution of minorities, creating violence and fear, eliminating political diversity, economic disparity and exploitation, and just general degradation of our culture. If you don't look at the full impact on your county and see what the cumulative effect is, you don't really see what's happening. One of the things that happened when the arts community lost the three members of the arts community lost their funding, was that the rest of the arts community had a meeting where they thought, should we take the money that is now gone to us instead of those three and give it to those three? Or should we as a group come forward and challenge this response because it was so clearly a political response? They didn't either. And the second thing that happened was that I'm at one of the meetings of one of these arts groups, and they're saying, do we need to change our diversity and equity policy and call it something different? And one of the things that Tim Snyder says is, do not obey in advance. He says, most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more oppressive government will want, and they offer themselves without being asked. A citizen that adopts in this way is teaching power what to do. The autocrat sows fear, opponents leave the field, institutions falter, and the autocrat becomes more powerful. So I hope this is giving you a sense of the global impact on Sarasota of this emerging fascist party. Thank you. By the way, here's a list of books that I think are terrific. The three on the left, Tyranny, Laboratories of Autocracy, and How Fascism Works, are older books. The three great audio books that have just come out are Ministry of Truth, Erasing History by Jason Stanley, and Autocracy, Inc. by Anne Applebaum. Thank you.
Okay, great. Very nicely done. Okay. Thank you very, very much for that. My name is David Silverberg, as you heard the introduction, and I want to talk about here in Collier County and what's been going on. First of all, I'm going to take a little quibble. We don't have fascism as it was defined in Europe. We do not have a fascist party by that name here in Florida. We don't have a movement that's fascist with a capital F. What we have is a lot of fascistic developments, both in Florida, here in Collier County, I'm sorry to say, but I'm going to really draw that distinction. And I'm also going to use a term called fascio-Trumpism, because, you know, it's fascistic, and we know that when we're saying fascism, we mean it in a generic sense. It's authoritarian, it's dictatorial, it's oppressive, and of course we have Donald Trump, who has unleashed all this in the world. And by the way, I Googled fascio-Trumpism. It's nowhere on Google, so you are hearing it here for the first time. Here in Florida, we have Trump Light, the man where charisma goes to die, as Rick Wilson put it, Governor Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, as we all know, is a total creature of Trump. He would not exist on the political stage if Trump hadn't endorsed him in his race for governor and got him through the primary. And he is, as Dale very ably showed, he is trying to coordinate across the state in its culture and its society this anti-woke, fascio-Trumpist culture. But right here in Collier County, we've had some disturbing trends, and I'm sure you've all been following them. And the chief evangelist for this is our very own Francis Alfred Oakes III, whom we all know as Alfie. And when you look at it, the similarities between Alfie and Trump are really remarkable. They're both businessmen, they're both bombastic, they're both mercurial, they're both fanatical in their ways, they're both fascio-Trumpist, MAGAs. Alfie once talked got a phone call from Trump and thinks he's just about God. And before I go further on Alfie, and it's not entirely focused on Alfie, but I want to make clear that I don't hate this guy. I have met him. I did an article on him for a magazine called Mother Jones. He sat down with me. We had a 2-hour interview. He was gracious. He was cordial. He was, I think, forthcoming and truthful, well, I'm sure where it was in his interest. If the guy stuck to food and groceries, we'd all be better off, and he would be a whole lot better off. But Alfie has his opinions, and he is absolutely entitled to those opinions. He's entitled to express those opinions, and I support that. But we are entitled to respond and react to those opinions and to his actions. And it's the actions that are really count. And one other thing, just to cover my backside, he is a public figure. Alfie is politically active. He was a state committeeman in the Collier County Republican Party. So his actions are subject to scrutiny, criticism, and analysis. Having said that, he has tried to impose a fascio-Trumpist ideology on Collier County, and especially on the Republican Party in Collier County. He won as a state committeeman in 2020. He ousted a guy named Doug Rankin. He was riding on his defiance of COVID protocols, and in the midst of the passions and the pressures of the pandemic. And he pretty much took control of the Republican Executive Committee here in Collier County, the REC, or as I prefer to call it, the REC. And between the REC and his own political action committee, Citizens Awake Now, CANPAC, he succeeded in altering the political balance here in Collier County. Now, in 2022, he put up 3 candidates for the school board, and then 2 candidates for the Collier County Commission. He won all his races, which was an achievement, if you want to use that word. But as a result, we have in Collier County a very fascio-Trumpist agenda. And the commission and the school board have moved in that direction, although there are changes in the school board. When you look at what our Board of Commissioners has passed, they passed a federal nullification law, the so-called Bill of Rights Sanctuary Ordinance, which says that Collier County has the right to nullify federal law, to not obey it if it considers it unconstitutional, which is really going to come and bite this county, which I can go into detail later. They've outlawed mask and public health mandates, and they passed what was a very, very, very critical anti-public health resolution that got watered down. But that anti-vax, anti-COVID, anti-mandate, anti-public health effort. It was very much promoted. Fortunately, the ordinance, the law that has penalties that they passed, just duplicated state law. State law says you can't have mask mandates anymore, and it says the same thing. So it didn't really make that much of a difference. Like Sarasota County, they withdrew Collier County from the American Library Association. Then last month they passed an anti-Amendment 4 resolution. Now that doesn't have the force of law, but it was the start here in Collier County of a movement to have the counties come out against Amendment 4 and a woman's right to choose, and we saw it just passed again in Lee County. So it is moving along. I don't know how many people it's going to influence to go against Amendment 4, but they did that. And then weirdly, and I got to admit, I really did not see this coming, they voted to end fluoridation in Collier County water. And so now all the kids can get cavities, and they can make more work for local dentists, and Alfie will protect his pineal glands, which he was worried about. And by the way, everybody who buys toothpaste, you got to look for that fluoride because you're not going to get it from the water in Collier County. Let me also point out, and this came up in our interview, he says, Alfie, that he owns 3,000 guns, that he can arm every employee of Seed to Table. And in 2022, he was addressing a group and he said, I'm all in. We don't want to talk about what that is, meaning that if he didn't like the way the 22 elections had come out, he might launch an armed revolt. He said, but we have to be all in. Well, the 22 elections went very well for him, so we still live under, law and order. Now, all this is very menacing, and he was moving to further extend this in 2024. But something very, very interesting happened, and it happened this past August, on August 20th. There was a revolt. There were people who had enough of Alfie and Alfie fascio Trumpism and MAGism here in Collier County, and the people who revolted were all the Republicans. The Republicans in their primary repudiated the Alfie MAGA candidates for all the different offices that he was proposing. And Alfie didn't care about anybody's qualifications. In fact, I heard him once say in a speech, he said, I don't care what a person's IQ is or what their education is. All they need is some back and common sense. So he was looking for fellow fanatics, and he had them up for 2 school board seats. He had them up for a county commission. All 3 were incumbents, but he really wanted to get rid of Bert Saunders in the 3rd district. And of course, he wanted to get rid of Melissa Blazier as supervisor of elections. That was a very dangerous one, and the county assessor. And at that point, he had reached a point where the Republicans said no, especially in the technical offices like supervisor of elections, where expertise is really important, where you have to know what you're doing. Even the Republicans had had enough. And by the way, Collier County, and I hope you appreciate it, is a pretty well-run county. This place functions, and it functions very well. And maybe Steve Bannon will call it the deep state, but I'll call it the deep county, and it works for us. And had he gotten these other people in, it would not have. Now, there was one position that he did win, a lawyer, and she is now a committee person on the rec. And when she was the one who drafted this federal nullification law, and when she did it in 2021, well, it might be in 1821. When she did it in 2021, our own David Milstein characterized that law as proposed by someone who doesn't know constitutional law. But she won her election as state committee person. So why is this revolt, this little revolt among the rec, so significant? Well, I think it's significant because it shows that there's a line, there is a point beyond which this kind of Fascio-Trumpism becomes oppressive even to those people who adhere to these party principles. And these are the folks that Rick Wilson was talking about. These are people who still think, people who are thoughtful. I mean, they're very conservative. I mean, have no doubt about that. But they know fascism when they see it, and they didn't want any part of it. And they responded with a fundamental American patriotism and belief in freedom and liberty, and they expressed this at the voting booth, and all those MAGA candidates lost. And by the way, Alfie, of course, got disqualified because he didn't fill out his papers properly. And so he is off the wreck. And Doug Rankin, who he deposed in 2020, is now going to be the head of the REC. He's a very conservative guy. He's been, I think, a conservative Republican from the womb, but he is not Alfie's Republican. So my hope is that the same kind of revulsion and the same kind of revolt and the same kind of discontent with this kind of fascio-Trumpism is abroad in the land, and that Rick will get the percentage of Republicans who have had enough. They will vote for freedom and for liberty. But, you know, we have to remain vigilant. Now I want to talk about the what we do about it part of this presentation. You know, remember something, even after this election, as Rick Wilson pointed out, there are going to be attempts to negate what happens, to overturn the results. And Florida, Lord knows, has a record of passing constitutional amendments that the legislature and the governor then ignore. And we've got to hold their feet to the fire. But there are maybe three broad principles that we can follow. One is vigilance. We've got to be on top of everything these people are doing. And as Dale mentioned, one effort that is truly fascist, and fascist with a capital F, is an attempt to make this a one-party state. And there have been those attempts. And Christian Ziegler, who was chair of the Florida Republican Party before he got deposed in a sex scandal, once said that for the Republican Party of Florida, the work continues as our job is not done until there are no more Democrats in Florida. This is not competition. This is extermination. And that is a very, very bad trend. And there was one bill proposed last year that would have decertified the Democratic Party in Florida. It wasn't serious. It didn't advance. But it shows a mentality, and we have to be especially vigilant to that. We have to be a multi-party state because we're a multi-party society. Our media plays an essential role in this, and I have to say that I have been disappointed by our local media. I don't think they keep track of these people. They don't emphasize the political threats that are out there to the degree I wish they would. And this is why I started the Paradise Progressive blog, which I hope you're familiar with or will be familiar with afterwards. And it's trying to fill the gap that I see in our political reporting from our traditional media. We've got a good reporter in Dave Elias, who's very active on NBC2. But, you know, he can't do it alone. We all have to be our own monitors, our own minute people to keep track of these kinds of loony ideas like getting rid of the fluoride and do it when it's coming up. You know, they passed an anti-immigrant law last year. That law went through subcommittee, it went through committee, it went through the legislature as an entirety, and this is a statewide law. And then Ron DeSantis signed it into law, and then suddenly the protests start. I'm sorry, that's not when you do it. You may be mad about the law, but you've got to be active when it's being formulated, when it's on the table. And that brings us to the second pillar, which is response. You've got to respond. You've got to be vigilant, and when you see something bad, you've got to respond. And you've got to, here in Collier County, that means contacting our Board of Commissioners. And even if they don't listen, even if they vote against it, they need to know that there are people who are watching what they do. There have been statements in the Collier County Commission. Well, Chris Hall once said, something is out there. He couldn't understand why there was all this protest against it. It was because he put it out there. It was a loony law that he wanted to do, and everybody saw what it was, and they protested, and it does have an effect. And that also applies at the congressional level, and we can get into our congressmen some other time. But you've got to be vigilant, responsive, and the third pillar is activism. You've always got to be active. It doesn't end with the election. It doesn't start with the run-up to the election. The day after the election, we're going to have to be active. And as Michelle Obama said in her speech to the Democratic National Convention, do something, all right? So we all know, look, none of us are going to take up arms. I'm pretty sure that no matter what happens, none of us are going to go out and shoot up a firehouse or something like that. But we all know what the traditional things are. Making phone calls, canvassing, which, by the way, is a great exercise, gets you to meet all your neighbors, and you talk to people, writing postcards. All of this are democratic norms. I want to add another challenge to everybody. Since social media is now our preferred and most common use of communication, I want to challenge everybody here to reach out to 10 people they have never met, never contacted, and don't know, and try to convince them to your point of view, whatever that point of view is, if you think that's important. 10 people you don't know. You got to get outside of your bubble. You got to talk beyond your friends. Lord knows there's plenty of feeds and all sorts of things. There's all these nice Chinese ladies who want to get to know me. I could talk to them. But you can reach out to people that you've never talked to, never met, and do it on and use social media. You can do it at home. You can do it at any hour. You can do it, unprompted, or when you're relaxing or taking a bath or whatever. But try to reach out to people, and that's really important, and it's especially important for this election. Now, all my recommendations are based on the premise that we'll have a democracy, that our laws will function, that you can do these things, that it's legal, that it's protected. If we lose democracy, we lose everything, and I think everybody in this room knows it. And today, as Rick pointed out, is 30 days to the most important election of our lifetimes, our children's lifetimes, and our grandkids' lifetimes. I don't have a grandchild who's ready to vote yet, but she will be affected by what we do here next month. And it brings up to me what I consider one of the most meaningful elections that ever occurred. And that occurred on September 11th, 2001. And all of us in that room remember that day. And it was an election held in the back of an airplane, United Airlines Flight 93. And we know what had happened. Al-Qaeda hijackers had taken over that plane, killed the pilot and the co-pilot, and there was one standing outside the cockpit threatening to blow up the plane with a bomb. The passengers went into the back, and they had to decide what to do. They knew that that other planes had hit the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. They didn't know where they were headed. And so what did they do? They took a vote. They held an election. They held an election because that's what we as Americans do. When we are faced with a decision, when we are faced with a course of action, we take a vote. And there was one passenger, Todd Beamer, who said, okay, let's roll. And they voted to try to take back that airplane. Nobody said the vote was rigged. Nobody said that there had to be a hand count of ballots. No one said there was a secret landslide that nobody had seen. And nobody said they weren't going to accept the results of that vote. Because that's not what Americans do, not what real patriotic Americans do. And that's not what those passengers did on that airplane. They took a vote. They acted on their decision. Now, the plane crashed. They fought for that cockpit, and ultimately it crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But by their action, they may have saved the United States Capitol. They may have saved the White House. Who knows how many thousands of Americans' lives they saved. And let me tell you, I was on the ground in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. My wife was working at home. My son was in a high school next to the CIA. We were all saved by those people as a result of their election. Now, today, we have hijackers again. We are the passengers in the back of that plane. And these people are trying to take that aircraft into darkness and dictatorship and disaster. And we have got to get control of that aircraft. And on November 5th, we will hold that election. And I hope we will all work, and I certainly intend to make sure that we get that airplane under control and we land it safely in a free democracy. So that's 1 month from today. Each of us has something to do. So let's roll. I got a drink.
Can you hear? Oh, there we go. Woo! I didn't want to wear the Britney Spears thing anyway. So, I'm a producer and host of WGCU. My name's Mike Canary. I have been with WGCU for a long time. I've covered a lot of things over the years. And about 2 years ago, Jim Nathan reached out to me and asked me to see if we could have him on our show Gulf Coast Life to talk about Floridians for Democracy, and I was happy to. So since then, over the last probably year and a half, I would guess, I've always been a curious person. I've always spent a lot of time trying to learn about history in the world, but I've spent a lot of time learning about what's happening to us in this country now, and the really clear analogs from our past and how it's all coming back again, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to enlighten people about that. But I want to ask you, David, a question first. Yes, Trumpo-fascism. That's a new phrase for me.
Fascio-Trumpism.
Trumpo-fascism. Sorry, fascio.
It works either way.
I think it's fair to say that we've wound up in a place politically where the MAGA movement is spending most of their time complaining about things that aren't real. And because people are clearly willing to believe that, then they think that the other side must be doing it too. And because, like you said, if what we're looking at, it might not be a direct analog to capital F fascism from Europe in the 30s and 40s, do you think using that term makes people who might need to be informed or convinced think that it's just, rhetoric? Like misplaced rhetoric. Does that make sense?
Not entirely. Well, no. I mean, let's look at what we're facing. Okay, Trump is the driving force. So and there is a Trumpism. There is a cult of personality. So that's the Trumpism part.
Yeah. I don't mean your term. I just mean like when people hear fascism, they think, oh, well, it's not what they did back then in Germany. Yes. Then they must just be I can now discount everything else they say because they used the F word.
Actually, the folks who subscribe to it, I don't think that subtly and how. It raises an interesting point. There's a real lack of knowledge of history, and because we see these patterns happening again with the generations that didn't experience them and don't know them. My favorite person, Alfie Oakes, was born in 68, and he believes that the 1950s were wonderful. That's what he wants to go back to. But he has no real historical depth or knowledge of what that was. very interestingly, here in Collier County, where we have this nullification ordinance, which I call it the Bill of Rights Sanctuary Ordinance, that's almost word for word with what South Carolina tried to pass in 1830. But they have no knowledge of that. And by the way, it was President Andrew Jackson who said, you're not nullifying federal law. Our federal union, it must be preserved. The fact it follows those old patterns, because the patterns are following human patterns. There's a longing for control. There's a longing for what supposedly was lost. There's a longing for dominance that you don't feel you have now. There's a sense of things slipping away. And that's the way the Germans felt in the 30s, and they're feeling the same way, but they haven't studied it. And by the way, I really want to recommend the book that Dale raised, The Nazi Seizure of Power, which the Collier County Public Library bought on my recommendation. And it is a great book because it does show you what happened in one town. And by doing that, you can really see how Nazism and fascism by its formal name, developed. And by the way, they fought it tooth and nail, but they were ultimately undercut by parliamentary politics. But it's a good book. I highly recommend it. They're doing the same thing again, but they don't even realize they're doing it. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. Because I often wonder whether, the supporters of this movement that we are describing as fascio-Trumpism are even aware that there are echoes of the past.
Some do. Some clearly are. I mean, neo-Nazis, they worship Hitler. But I think the mass does not. I think the majority of people who were storming the Capitol on January 6th, I don't think they had any of that historical background. I don't think they realized at all what they were doing in terms of the broad spectrum of history.
How long have you lived in Sarasota?
10 years.
10 years. Could you have imagined that we would be where we are in Sarasota as quickly now as we've been? Because I grew up in Fort Myers. I've spent a lot of time in Sarasota. It's always been a certain kind of place, and it's changed a lot just in a short time.
Yeah, I think what's surprising is how what we call normal Republicans remain silent on everything that's happening. And they are pretending like they're really not part of the MAGA movement, but they are unwilling to stand out publicly and confront it. And so they're enablers. And I think that's part of the German history in Nazism is, do they really want this? I mean, I look at the people in my condo. We have about 35 units in the condo downtown in Sarasota. A lot of them are Republicans. I'm constantly thinking, do they really want us to go down this direction with Donald Trump and end our democracy? Because at this stage, they cannot be, they're smart people. They know what's happening here. They can read about, Project 2025. And so are they willing to be all in on this in order to maintain their power? Or is it really that it's just the politicians that are doing this, and they don't know how to get out of this bind between their commitment to a party that they've been members of their entire life and this kind of ugly thing that's coming down the path, and they don't know what to do. If they speak out against it, I mean, I'm running for the hospital board. It's very interesting that members of the hospital board have been Republicans. There hasn't been a Democrat on the hospital board for about 20 years. So it's been Republican. And I'm thinking, the mission of the hospital is to improve the health and the safety of the community. And so when they're in the boardroom, they're doing things like, let's improve the quality of life. Let's build some additional ERs and so forth. And then they step outside of the boardroom, and they're willing to support this anti-vax stuff that's coming out of Dr.
Latipo.
They don't confront that. They're a member of a hospital board, and they aren't willing to publicly come out against that, doing nothing about gun violence, which is now the #1 cause of death in children between the ages of 1 and teens and 18, unwilling to really stand up and support expansion of health care, like expanding Medicare would help the hospital and would help the community. So they have this they're sitting there representing a community health person They step outside of that, and they're supporting policies that are just contradictory to what they're trying to do. So I'm having great trouble understanding what they're going to do going forward in terms of this whole issue that you've raised is the election.
If I can add a personal story to that. Back in 2018, I worked on the campaign of David Holden. You may remember him, some of you. And I was his communications director. And David was a bright, articulate, intelligent guy who reached out and had a lot of appeal to a lot of people and Republicans. And I got a call from a woman who said, you know, I'm a Republican. Why don't you guys do some ads with Republicans coming out and saying that they'll support David Holden because they like him? And I said, that is a fantastic idea. Will you be the first one? And you can tell by the reaction you've had, you can imagine the reaction I got. It's too daunting. Now, nationally, we've had, good Lord, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, all the people who worked for Donald Trump coming out against him, saying they won't vote for him. So they realize what the stakes are. But getting it done locally, that's a real challenge. And I don't know if we'll have that, but there's clearly discontent in the Republican Party here.
Well, the story you told seems to indicate that there's at least a little bit of that in terms of the Alfie Oakes candidates.
Yes. And remember, they did it at the voting booth. Mm-hmm. And there were people who came out against the candidates he was endorsing. And that's how it fought itself out. And you know, he had his endorsed candidates. And then one day I got an email, and it's from the Collier County Citizens Value Political Action Committee, CCCC VPAC. And they had endorsed an entirely different slate of candidates. Not only that, they said they were tired of the authoritarian stance and his endorsement of angry, unqualified individuals. I mean, this is a declaration of war. And that was what alerted me to the uprising in the Collier County Republican Party.
Is there anything like that in Sarasota? I remember seeing during the primary that there were some candidate races that surprised me.
Yeah, you know, like I said, they defeated at the primary level at the school board. They defeated MAGA candidate, and now have two non-MAGA candidates, not a majority for the Sarasota school system. And then all of the anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers that were running for the hospital board were defeated by the regular Republicans at the primary. So there is that sense that they're willing to, you know, push back. But, you know, it's to protect these institutions that are important to them personally, like a hospital. You know, everybody wants a good hospital, and they were afraid of privatization or other things happening to the hospital. But going beyond that, we'll see.
It's interesting you use the word regular Republicans, and everybody knows what you mean. It's just it's good evidence
I don't know what else to use,
of how far we've gone in such a short period of time. Yeah, we'll do a Q&A now.
I have a couple of things to say. One, the regular Republicans, this group of ladies, we started about a year ago, and we're independents, Democrats, and Republicans. And thanks to Sandy Parker, some of you know her, she told us how to play the game and how the Republicans have been taking over control. So once we did, we became rhinos for the first time in our lives, and we voted for the people that we wanted. And so this is what's happening, too, that you have independents and you have Democrats that are becoming Republicans to have our way.
You know, I've always thought that the rhinos should start their own party. They already have a mascot.
Right.
And instead, and let me tell you something, if you've ever seen a rhinoceros in the wild, you don't I have in Africa, and you don't mess with them.
Trust me, these ladies you don't mess with.
Rhino should not stand for Republican in name only. It should stand for a really independent, nasty opponent. And if I was a Republican, maybe I'd start it.
And just one other thing. I was just in Ybor City in Tampa, and I didn't realize that there was a women's march of 5,000 women back in 1937 against fascism in Spain.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know those women aren't here, but where are their relatives, you know? They were Latinos also.
Hi, David. It's
Hi,
Vicki.
Vicki.
Haven't seen you in a while. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Anderson. You got to get rid of Ziegler on the school. If only she'd gone that day and gotten caught.
She's there.
I am wearing my vintage 2016 T-shirt today. It says "Pussy grabs back." I don't get to wear it anymore because we all got complacent and it didn't happen. So I want to talk a little bit about complacency and fear. We're all focused like laser beam on Trump because the election's 30 days away. But what I'm seeing is like a clownification of Trump, and it's getting to be easier for some people to shed him because of the way he talks, the apparent dementia. And J.D. Vance scared the crap out of me at that debate because he was so smooth and normal seeming. I'm hearing people talk about him being progressive because they're fooled. And Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin and people like that with the money. Curtis Yarvin says he wants to shut down all the government agencies and shut down all the universities, rip it out by the roots. There, as you guys have said, and as the earlier speaker said, it's what happens after Trump either dies because he's old and sick or gets so humiliated by defeat. That's going to be our real battle, do you think?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's very interesting. After January 6th, well, let me go back to the Nazi analogy, okay? In 1923, November 9th, 1923, Adolf Hitler led what was then a small band of Nazis, and he tried to take over Munich and Bavaria. And he was trying to imitate what Mussolini had done in Italy in 1922, where he marched on Rome and he took over Italy. And he was stopped. Hitler was stopped. And he was imprisoned for 9 months, which is when he wrote Mein Kampf. And everybody kind of figured that the Nazi movement was over. And what had happened is one phase of the Nazi movement had ended, but another one was beginning. And Hitler said he would work through constitutional means, which he did, until he attained power in 1933. And it occurred to me that January 6th was the end of one phase of the battle. Now there's this other phase that will be defined by this election, but sadly the battle will not be over. And we have to stay vigilant, responsive, and active, and watch what happens. And I'll tell you the thing that really worries me is even if Amendment 4 passes with a 60% vote that it will, I don't want to make predictions. All my optimistic predictions are always wrong, and my pessimistic ones always come true. But let's say it passes. Let's say it passes with 60%. Let's say it is even written into the Constitution of the state of Florida. They will still try to circumvent it, defeat it, avoid it, whatever you can imagine, and stuff that you can't even begin to imagine. And so the vigilance, you want to rest, you want to stop, but the vigilance has to continue. And our media is so important to maintaining that vigilance and keeping us informed of what's going on. And that's why we have to, we all have to stay alert. Oh,
yes, hi. My name's Michael. Our first speaker talked about the fact that we're going to have to live with the Electoral College. However, he didn't mention the fact that there are movements in many states to have state constitutional amendments that the winner of the national vote will get the electors of that state. Why can't we do that in Florida? And actually, why haven't we started such an amendment drive? We did it for Amendment 4. We did it for Amendment 3. We've got the one coming up for Medicaid and the one for clean water. Why not go for this one too?
Well, I can answer that. Somebody's got to propose it. We got to get it through the legislature.
I think that's the national popular movement, right? Yeah, and I forget how many states have done it, 35 maybe, or some number. So I don't know what the status of that is or how likely it'll occur. Yeah. Yeah, then it has to go through.
Jeff, I'm gonna have okay.
Is it live? Yes, I'm Bill Pittinger, and I'm very concerned about the trivialization of the fluoride. I'm bedeviled with dental problems, thousands of dollars, and anyway, the fluoride in the toothpaste is accompanied by microplastics, which is a cleansing mechanism of the toothpaste. And if these kids are swallowing the damn toothpaste to get fluoride, and the possibility that these microplastics are going to cause health problems, in other words, this is not a solution, but I do think that there's a potential, for using this politically as a football and, attacking this problem.
So this is a question for Dale, because I'm married to the other speaker. I already know what he'll say. But we have all seen on a national level people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, using their money to influence media, to making these mega donations. What I wanted to know is more on a local level, how much is money? I mean, I know you've got Michael Flynn in your area, and he lives in Venice, I know, and how much is money influencing the local politics?
A huge amount. It's interesting, having never run for an office before, I suddenly said, well, I need to go in and see who's contributing to what, right? So you go in and look at who's contributing to the local state senator. And you look on the Democrat side and you see individual names, and they gave $50 and $25. You go down that line. And then you go to the Republican candidate, and it's $1,200 from Publix. It's $1,200 from Home Depot or someplace. Citizens United, right, open the door for this. So you have all of these companies that are maximizing the contributions at the local levels for these candidates, and you have just individual citizens on the Democratic side trying to come up with the money. So it's huge because you know what? It buys signs. And big signs, you go around Sarasota right now, big signs with pictures and names, and it costs a lot of money, but they're dominated by Republican signs. And that money makes a difference. Even in fact, there are some Republican strategists that think that just the signs are what win the elections for them. Just getting that name out with people driving up and down 41 or Fruitville Road or somewhere and seeing those names and that name recognition thing. So it makes a big difference. And Citizens United was another. The Supreme Court has opened the door for autocracy, and they've done it through their decisions around Citizens United, their decision on Selby, where they basically undermined the Voting Rights Act, their decision about Trump's immunity. And then I think they're moving in directions that are going to open the door for religious freedom that are going to really, really make a mess. So when in my darkest mood, I look at the January 6th insurrectionists, and I put those Supreme Court justices right next to them and say they're part of the same insurrection.
In the vein of what David has suggested to us, do something, and Michelle Obama, I wanted to let everyone here know that we're hosting a forum here on Amendment 4. Oh. It's called the Forum on 4, and it's a community conversation to look at the issues that are really encompassed in this amendment and what it means to pass it or not pass it. And Mike and I already did a show that's going to be airing October 14th. Yeah, it'll air a week from Monday. I recorded it on Thursday or Friday. With some of the panelists. But if you know of people who still haven't made a decision about Amendment 4, or we're still confused about the language, or just really want to know what the issues are, please tell them to come. It's open to the public. Please calm yourselves and spread the word. Okay.
And real quick, I just want to throw something out. I did a show about 3 weeks ago with the campaign finance spending person from the Brennan Center for Justice, and by digging into the numbers, in the 2020 election, between the House and the Senate and the White House, there was like $7 billion raised. That's $7,000 million raised. And about half of that goes to commercials on local TV stations. And I just question whether local TV stations have any interest in campaign finance reform, because that's a really big boost that they get.
You know, it's funny, having dealt with TV stations and campaign advertising, frequently they get stiffed. You know.
What do you mean?
The campaigns buy time
and then don't pay.
Do not pay.
Wow.
And there's one.
Well, what do they do with the money?
Well, they don't have the money, and they didn't have the money to begin with, or it went to the wrong purposes. The other thing is that the TV stations are required to run the ads. And they can only charge the lowest rate.
Yeah, they have to charge lowest rate, and if they take one side, they have to take the other.
Well, it used to. Now, this was interesting. We used to have the fairness doctrine in broadcast, where if you had one side, you absolutely had to have equal time for the other side, and that was repealed. And I can't remember the exact year, but under Reagan, because they repealed it, there was this lunatic in Missouri who only wanted to talk on AM radio, and his name was Rush Limbaugh. And repealing the fairness doctrine made Rush Limbaugh possible, and then that proliferated. And it was interesting because he revived AM radio. AM radio was almost dead. You couldn't broadcast stereo music over it. Nobody was listening to it. And he found a purpose and a content, and AM radio revived, and you know, you had farmers in their tractors listening to him for hours on end. But that was the consequence. The consequence of repealing the fairness doctrine means that you have sometimes this imbalance, but it is, you know, still free expression.
My name is Richard Canarelli. I'm from Venice. And I want to thank both of the presenters for just absolutely superb presentations. I would like a comment from one or both of you on the influence of Christian nationalism on this Trump fascism and you know, and what everything that's, and Project 2025, if you can.
I'd like that. There's going to be a forum here on October 14th on precisely that, and I'm speaking at that one too. Without giving too much away, I mean, obviously, there's an element of Christian nationalism in this, you know, fascio-Trumpism. A lot of this is driven by people who feel things slipping away. They try to, in the best instance, they try to live moral lives, and they see all this, what they regard as immorality in the rest of the society, and they're trying to pull it back. They're trying to, this is what Make America Great Again means, at least means to them. So I don't know if that's helpful, but with that, in terms of Project 2025, I've been devoting a lot of time to that. And what, if you go on the Paradise Progressive blog, what I've been trying to do is go into that, go into the details, and try to determine how it will directly affect us here in Southwest Florida. I did one article, and by the way, having covered Homeland Security, they have a whole chapter on Homeland Security, and there's some extraordinary stuff in there. I did one thing they would do is put an end to the National Flood Insurance Program. So you wouldn't get any more flood insurance. That was the first thing that stood out for me. I mean, us here in Collier County in Southwest Florida, and no federal flood insurance. Second was how they'd restructure FEMA. They restructure it so that all the burden for disaster recovery would fall on states and localities and counties who they couldn't bear it. A third one was what it would do to education. And I looked in their chapter on education. They do want to disestablish the Department of Education, but what does that mean? It would mean, again, the impact is largely fiscal. Collier County gets $7 million in direct federal grants, and that would probably disappear, and it gets $70 million in federal grants through the state, and who knows what would happen to that. And I'm working on something because they want to get rid of NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and that will be the next piece in the series. As it looks like Tropical Storm Milton bears down upon us. Yeah. But so I hope, I don't know if I fully answered your question on Christian nationalism is a topic that deserves its own forum, and we'll be looking at that. But a little preview. We have a Collier County commissioner, a MAGA commissioner, totally backed by Alfie Oakes, Chris Hall. He is my commissioner in District 2. I went to a coffee that he held, and he gets up and absolutely apropos of nothing, he says there is no separation between church and state. None. And I wish I'd jumped up and yelled at him, but I didn't. But we'll explore that more in the next forum.
I'm Dwight Usman, and I've known David since 2018, so I'm going to put him on the spot.
Okay.
I had never heard him speak before today, and I was very impressed. Would you consider running for office?
No. My answer to that is, if I was 20 years younger and 20 times richer, yes, but not now. I'm very happy at home with June, and I think that's where I'm going to stay. But I'm going to keep agitating. And look, my profession was as a journalist. I'm going to keep using journalism to try to preserve democracy here in little Southwest Florida. And I got to tell you, in Washington, D.C., first of all, as a journalist, I wasn't allowed to be political. I wasn't allowed to take sides. We never had banners or put anything in our homes or put stickers on our cars. And you had to be absolutely objective. And I was covering I was an editor dealing with politics. But my own inclinations were, I guess I'd call myself a conservative Democrat. And I moved down here, and the atmosphere is so polarized, and suddenly I'm this radical Marxist, and I didn't change, I didn't do anything. I still believe the way I did. But I have no plans to run for any office.
That's a shame.
Thank you.
Glenn Nelson, longtime Republican. My issue is that down here in Florida, in these communities, we're gated communities, and you really don't want to rattle anybody else's cage. And so I go back to, like 1972 after Watergate. We used to do the neighbor-to-neighbor Republican fundraisers and stuff, and it required some structure and stuff. But these ladies with the rhino thing, the other thing I do would go color purple and have a purple wave and have, but ladies, you got to run with this and give us some place to caucus and structure. We've lost that kind of thing with our stance where we are good Republicans. We like to use the system and want to do what's right. And ladies, go for it.
I would say there is the potential for a new party. The Republican Party was a response to the breakdown of the Whigs and the Democrats who were all pro-slavery. And the Times demanded a new party. And in Ripon, Wisconsin, they founded one. And I think there is room for a rhino party. And I can see the flag, man. And maybe that would bring a new centrism to the political dialogue.
I had someone just text me a question for Dale. You didn't mention anything they said in Sarasota about General Flynn and the efforts to teach and arm the nation. What's your observation about Sarasota and General Flynn?
Yeah. So he isn't that much. He tried to get some power under the Republican Party there, and he lost his ability to get. They have a very large executive committee. The Republican Party does, from what I understand. He tried to get a bunch of candidates on there, and they got some, but he's not been able to take control of the Republican Party in Sarasota County. He certainly is like the leading personality around Christian nationalism. I mean, he'll speak about it. That's his passion. And a lot of these candidates that have been coming up for the school board and the hospital have been recruited by him. They have this location in the southern part of Sarasota County called the Hollow, where you may have read about. Actually, it's gotten a lot of coverage. Washington Post, wrote an article about the Hollow and what's going on down there. It's, Moms from Liberty started in Sarasota County with Bridget Ziegler, right? And actually, if you go down on Main Street, there's a place down there where they bring in potential leaders that want to start Moms for Liberty groups around the nation, and they have a training for parents to come in and learn how to take control of the curriculum in the school boards, at school boards. So, and they'll have a group of 30 come in, and so, or some number, and come through and train. And if you look at when she started that, and go on the map and see the number of those Moms for Liberty chapters around the country, most states have a Moms for Liberty chapter. So they've been very effective in terms of their organization on that. Michael Flynn you don't hear him speak publicly. He's kind of hidden behind the scenes on this. I'm not even sure he still lives in Sarasota County yet. There was some question about...
He bought a house in Englewood.
Yeah.
And he was in there, and he was saying a lot about local organizing.
Right.
He tried to set an example, and he didn't succeed.
He didn't really succeed in that too much. I mean, other than... But I've talked about just the organizations that have been harmed. But you got to step back and say, think of the global harm that this party's done on the state. Look at, what they did to immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and the impact it's had on the tomato industry and the farms.
Yes.
Look at what they did in terms of the schools and the impact it's had on nurses, many of them going into retirement. Look at the impact they've had on professors who are leaving the state. How does the state look at what they're doing to Florida and not say this is globally harmful to our entire communities? And until we kind of raise that picture about how harmful it is, it's going to be hard for people to see the total impact, because so much of it is little incremental changes, and you've got to look at the whole pictures.
This will be the last question.
Yeah, my name is Lena. Some of you know me in person or maybe through Facebook. I live here in Naples, although originally from Sweden. And this may be a little more of a comment than a question, but it's something that's worthy for all of us to think about. And that's that my biggest concern, just in general, with this election is people's ignorance. Because I see it everywhere. And I see people interviewed on TV, and I talk to friends and acquaintances, and all of us here in this room, compared to most people, we are probably so-called political junkies. We know what's going on, we know what to vote for, or made up our mind. But I talk to, for example, I talk to some friends or acquaintances. Have you heard of Project 25? No, I have no idea. And then I tell them a little bit about it. Oh, that's never going to happen. And it's like I'm trying to convince them. And to some people, finally, I tell them, well, the German people in the 1930s, they never believed that the Jews were going to be put in concentration camps. And then I can see that maybe they start thinking a little bit. But I just thought I needed to mention this, because we need to be aware how we need to educate people. Because the lady, the cashier at Publix, the person you work out with you, next to you in the gym, chances are they have no idea, and they see that they have less money, the paycheck doesn't last as long, this as it did, and now as it did 4 years ago, and they say, oh, I'm voting for Trump. Yeah, so they just don't know anything, and that's what's happened in their own little bubble. So this is really, really scary that these ignorant people might get Trump into the office, and we don't want that to happen. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's why we're here. That's why we're all here. And I know the weather's terrible outside, but and some might think it's a little frightful, but we had a program today that was quite delightful. And to all the virtual people and to our people that are still here that don't want to go out in the storm, thank you so much to our speakers. Their preparation, phenomenal. Stay and mill around, and to our virtual people, have a great evening, and I know you got football games on, so bye-bye.
I'm talking